really, really hard drafts. I think once in a while, and Dan, I don't know if you agree on this one, but like FFPC occasionally, because there's so many tables, once in a while you get an easier, like relatively easier draft. They're still really hard, but maybe once in a while you have some people that are doing like maybe don't do it as well and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say in general, FFPC live drafts are much softer than the NFFC ones. I think there's a lot more casual people. You've got people who are putting up the Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master screens around their laptop, and people drafting out of magazines and you name it. But still it's dangerous to even just take somebody too lightly. Like a couple of years ago, there was this guy drafting out of a magazine. We're like, this guy is just totally.
Please tell me he took it down, Dan. Please tell me.
He took down that league. I mean, he got a little bit lucky too, no doubt about it. I mean,
never fails.
Yep, he had like the best injury luck. He had like no injuries at all, and all that kind of stuff. But still, I mean, even with a magazine, he did better than 99% of the people with magazines would do. So I think he was just using it just to kind of remind him who the players were, make sure he didn't miss anybody. I don't think he was using the order in the magazine at all.
That's hilarious. It's like the poker table, right? The rookie at the table usually wins the night, and usually takes away the pot. You guys ready to fire this thing up?
Yep. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to rock, man.
Let's boogie.
Go district, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We are back in the district, and we're having some technicals right off the bat. Look at that. Sorry, Theo, we're trying to cut you in half there, buddy. You're too wide, man. We had to.
I'm too quick. I'm too quick with it. You can't.
You're too quick. You're dodging, and we got our boy Dan. Dan, you looking bronze. You looking fresh, relaxed. How was the vacay, brother?
Oh, the vacation was awesome. It was just absolutely fantastic. We had great weather almost every day. So hard to argue about that. We did get locked out of Yellowstone when all the craziness was happening there. That happened to be just when we were trying to get there. But other than that, I mean, we were able to kind of pivot off of that and find some other things to do. Grand Teton Park is just to the south, and we found some hiking trails outside of Yellowstone. And through it all, my daughter was doing job interviews, so she had like a suit blazer and blouse and all that, ready to go. And there were a couple times where she'd sit in the hotel room in the morning and I'd get kicked out and she'd do an interview or whatever. And but happy to say she has gotten a job. So
nice.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome, Deb. That's great, man.
Awesome. That's
so
awesome.
It was a very productive road trip as well. So, but
nice.
We did like 6,000 miles in the car. 6,113, I think it was. It was insane. And of course, when we planned the trip, gas was like $2 a gallon cheaper.
Oh man, so, that's right, eh?
Yeah.
You mean an expense account for that for that part of the trip, right? Oh man. Well, we're glad to have you back, man. We missed you while we were gone. Theo, we're fresh off of a monster show last night with Glenn Lowy. I mean, this guy does not just dominate high stakes. He dominates high stakes across different platforms. And tonight, we have a multiple winner from 2021. I know how excited you are about tonight. I'm going to let you walk this man in.
So I'm really excited that we're having Tommy Libretti on the GOAT District. I've been talking with Tommy for a couple of months, and he had an unbelievable season last year. He took down the NFFC Primetime. He took down the NFFC Silver Bullet. I think the last NFFC player to win two majors in 1 year was Mike Santos, who's an NFFC Hall of Famer. So you're in very, very rare company, Tommy. Congratulations on all your success, and we're excited to get a chance to talk to you. And I'm excited because I have Tommy and Dan on the show together tonight, and the subject we're going to be talking about tonight, hitting the dead zone running backs and some later round running backs, mid-round running backs. We're looking to find running back value, and we have two great drafters who really look to attack wide receivers early in their drafts often. So this is going to be an awesome, awesome show tonight, guys. Tommy, welcome to GOAT District.
Thank you guys for having me. Real honor to be on. Thank you.
Yeah, this is awesome. So I gotta ask the first question right off the bat, and it was not even in there in your show sheet. But Moose on a Hill. Tell me where the name comes
from. Real simple, real quick. It stemmed from a childhood nickname. Playing football in the park, I was a little bit on the heavier side, and my friends used to call me Moose. I thought it was like a flattering nickname, but then I realized what it was. I was just physically unable to move. But then as I got older, it was quite the opposite because Moose actually move fairly well. They're very graceful. So I took the compliment in stride, so to speak.
There you go.
Daryl Moose Johnston. Daryl Moose Johnston of the Dallas Cowboys.
Absolutely.
Hell of a fullback.
Yes. Rare breed.
Yep, and we got to see some moose on our trip as well. So I'm pleased to be back and podcasting with one. That's fantastic. I love moose. I mean, there's very few creatures that are harder to find in the wild these days than moose, and it's always such a thrill to see one.
and shout out to Billy Wazowski in the chat room. So we have the online championship winner watching right now. We have three of the NFFC major titles in essentially around tonight. It's pretty awesome. Tommy, let's just dive into it. What's your general process for draft prep, and how active are you right now in like the end of June, early July?
My overall preparation begins immediately during the NFL playoffs because there's a lot of players that I'm targeting going into the following season that I want to see how they're doing on a bigger stage. And a couple of guys that I look for are rookies on this stage, and if they have a chance to outproduce what I believe their ADP will be the following season, Jalen Waddle, just to throw a quick example out there. So just simple filing as far as that goes begins during the NFL playoffs. Then once that settles down a little bit, I anticipate the NFL draft. I don't get into the rankings yet at this point because a lot of things are unsettled. There's a lot of development that still needs to go on. I still want to see where the rookies are going to land. So I'll do like a top 10 list, and then each passing week after that, I'll expand upon that. But I think I don't want to be too arbitrary with that information. So I like the information to come to me rather than try and predict where it's going. And then once the NFL draft happens and these rookies land where they land, that's when I start expanding on these lists and go from there.
No, for sure. And then do you occasionally use like best ball in your draft preparation? I know you're predominantly NFFC for your high stakes format you play in, but for preparing for those NFFC drafts, are you using you doing DraftKings or Underdog or anything like that?
Honestly, no, only because I think best balls are their own situation going on there. I think it's a completely different strategy. To use an example, even with that, is if I'm drafting in best ball, I would love to have the Miami Dolphins backfield. But in redraft, I want nothing to do with that backfield. So it's two completely different strategies. It's always nice to get a feel for where players are potentially going as far as, the studs are concerned. You get you get your feet wet in that respect. But doing redraft, I just use ADP and I condense it as much as I can with each passing week. So now that we're approaching July, I'll narrow down the ADP from June versus from March, let's say. And then as that information is condensed, that's when I really start preparing for the redraft.
NFFC lets you kind of whittle down which particular contest you want to see the ADP from. So this time of the year, you're really only looking at the online championship ADP?
Yeah. Yes, just the online championship because, once the higher stakes leagues come around, obviously there's, a lot of shark plays going on. But those players they're not necessarily secrets for the majority of the drafters. You can almost insert them where you think other players are going to be drafting. So yeah, primarily the OC is where I get a lot of the data from, and then I'll cross-reference that with players that I happen to like and see where I potentially think they're going to fall once the higher stakes leagues come around.
Dan, that's an interesting one. Dan, for your draft prep, you play in multiple formats. How many different ADP sources are you looking at? Are you only looking at FFPC and NFFC, or do you occasionally, dip in anything else? Just curious.
It depends. Yeah. So it depends on what format I'm drafting in and, what platform. I'll use whatever's the best ADP for that format and platform. So FFPC, I mean, if you're doing best balls, that's one thing. If you're doing, a tournament best ball, that's even a different thing as far as ADP goes. And, and then of course there's the, the football guys. And then the same thing on the NFFC side. You can be doing the best balls right now, but if you're using that for the online championship, you're probably going to be in a world of hurt. I mean, just because of the fact that quarterbacks go so much earlier in best ball because everybody's got, there's 35 rounds or 32 rounds, whatever it is, 32 rounds. And so, everybody's grabbing multiple quarterbacks and it pushes all the quarterbacks up. But when you're doing the online championship, it's a lot easier to wait on quarterback. So, it just depends on the format.
Fantasy Mojo, guys, go check out Fantasy Mojo for all your FFPC ADPs because you can get it right down to the tournament. The last 5 days, you can get a draft board. You can get a list with their earliest pick, latest pick. So go check out Fantasy Mojo. Our buddy Darren over there runs a great site, especially if you're working on the FFPC games.
Yeah, and even if you don't play FFPC, Fantasy Mojo is a great resource. And
I was going to say
it's also a great resource.
Yeah.
You see, JD and I, we were talking about the other day, you see some of these people on Twitter talking about, this guy's my target in the 5th round. And you're like, yo, buddy, where am I getting him in the 5th round? He's going in the 3rd round and all these FFPCs. And
I saw one today. I think Dave Hubbard called him out and he's like, dude, that was that was 3rd round. I don't know how long ago, this is maybe a month back now. So yeah, and that's why I'm saying when you go to Fantasy Mojo, and Dan, just when you're asking Dan, no matter where I'm drafting, I like to use, especially the football guys this time of year, because all the sharps are in those rooms drafting, right? So I like to use that even though I'm using a different platform. But yeah, the nice thing about the Mojo is you're getting the updated ADP, the last 5 days or whatever. That's the way I like to do it with the draft board.
Tommy, you had unbelievable success with having Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and Mark Andrews on both championship teams. Do you track your overall ownership percentage, or do you just follow, your conviction and you're willing to take the, similar players over and over again in these drafts? We talked in the pre-show about this. We've had tremendously successful players, and some have different approaches with just the ownership percentages. What's your take on it?
The higher stakes leagues is where I like to focus on certain players, and I have no problem. And Glenn mentioned this last night. I have no problem drafting the same guy if I feel and truly believe he's going to give me the best chance to win. I don't necessarily believe there's too much ownership of a particular player, but because I only stick to one platform, it's easy to file that information versus searching for the data that's telling me how much of a percentage I own of that particular player. So it's just a general feel that I have, but I do specifically like to target a group of players that I feel are going to give me the best chance to win. And I have no problem continuing drafting those guys at all.
And like how we were talking in the pre-show, how basically your season was made by not you in particular, but fantasy players in general going Mark Andrews over TJ Hawkinson and going Cooper Kupp over his teammate Robert Woods tilted just pretty much every league we play in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We like you said, we briefly talked about that, and in one league, I did deviate from taking Cooper Kupp and I took Woods instead. That the minute I hit click, I knew it was a mistake, but I did it just to diversify a little bit. It's something I honestly don't believe in, so I was even going against the grain with my own way of thinking, but it was actually ticking down. There was only a few more seconds left to pick. I distinctly remember this pick, and the minute, like I said, I hit click, it was not a good feeling.
We all know the feeling there. I mean, we've all done it. You're like, oh man, I keep taking the same guy. I better do something different this time. You do it, and you're like, no, should have just gone with my gut.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so you don't worry about like injuries or anything else. Like taking out one particular player that's key to a whole ton of your teams.
I mean, we're at a point now where injuries are going to affect all 12 owners at some point during the season. So I've immediately stopped worrying about them. And it's why I don't necessarily like taking running backs earlier in my draft. I feel like they're just harder to replace. I still feel like we're chasing the LaDainian Tomlinson days, and they just don't make that guy anymore. We got a glimpse of it with McCaffrey, but look what happened with him. His injuries now are non-contact injuries. So it's pushed me further away from the running back position in general. I mean, I do worry about the injuries, but I just feel that they're a little easier to make up when you're taking these receivers because, for comparison's sake, if you lose Cooper Kupp, that's a big deal. But you could plug in his backup, Van Jefferson, for a couple of weeks and get not the same output, but you could stay afloat a little bit. Whereas if Derrick Henry goes down, which we saw last year, when he went down, we didn't even know who his backup was. Even if you drafted him, chances are he wasn't even the guy. So just for the grand scheme of it, I do worry about the injuries, but more so on the wide receiver side because I feel like they're a little easier to replace.
No, for sure. It's, drafting with conviction is definitely you feel better at the end of the draft. And sometimes I think, trying to be diverse just to be diverse in some of the builds, it's probably good process if you reach a certain number of drafts. But I don't know what that magic number is. It's certainly like a high volume approach. And it's definitely, I know that like I'll feel better at the end of my drafts when I'm drafting my guys. And I respect you for that.
And that's what we're hearing from these guys who have done it. You know what I mean? That they're at the conviction, they're taking their guys and they're not being shy about it. And that's kind of the common thread that we're getting out of this, right?
Yeah. And I think especially at this time of year, follow your gut.
100%.
Take the people you think are the best values wherever you're finding them.
Yeah.
The people who you think that the players that can win leagues for you. And just know, kind of what your limits are on the ADP. Like I'm sure Tommy, just how far you'll chase particular players up the ADP before you say, you know what, that's enough. He's just not worth it anymore at that price. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those players as we move along here. But, for me anyway, I don't really care what my exposure is right now because I've still got a couple months left to, massage it and do other things, and if a player that I'm 50-60% exposed to gets hurt right now, I know I'm going to be still doing more drafts from now until the beginning of the season than what I've done since the start of the year till now. So I've got plenty of time to it's going to hurt, sure, but I've still got plenty of time to draft other teams that are going to do just fine.
I like how Jeffrey puts it too. Sorry, Theo.
That's another NFFC player. Shout out to.
There you go. There you go. Right? They know.
Yeah.
Jeff's a really good friend of mine.
Oh, is he? There you
Yeah,
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
But he's right. JD and we talked about this the other night. Like optimistic drafting.
Yep.
I mean, having an optimistic approach to your team, your builds are going to be stronger because you're not sitting there worried about guys. I mean, there's risk with any football player. You know, people that took Cam Akers last year or J.K. Dobbins last year in early drafts, you know, him going down was not bad process for them. Travis Etienne was not bad process for them. They were taking shots on him. Things happen, and then you adjust. And like Dan said, if one of your guys gets injured or this early, you can just cram in a bunch more drafts, right, Dan?
That's
There you
right.
go.
Is that what you?
I have to draft more. Crap.
Is that what you tell the
Absolutely.
weekend? Sorry, honey, I got to throw in another 10 G's in this thing. I got way too much Gibson. He just got hurt, or whoever it is. You know.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, the player I was banking on totally got hurt. So if you want me to win any money, you're just gonna have to let me draft more.
I'm just balancing the portfolio.
That's it. Yep.
Tell her it's the investments.
So are there and I'm interested what Dan has to say about this as well because he wasn't on last night with Glenn, but JD and I talked about with Glenn about particular stats that you use for your draft preparation. You know, some obvious ones like, you know, targets and catches and number of carries and all that kind of stuff. But are you looking at other metrics like, you know, target percentage on the team, targets per route run? Is there anything that like moves the needle for you that you look at maybe a little more than some other players?
Was that for
So, Tommy? Yeah, go. You take it first. Go ahead.
I used to be that guy. And I used to, when Larry Fitzgerald was in his prime, I used to be a value-based drafter where I would take 3-year averages and then add those up, come up with that average, and start drafting my players accordingly. But what happened was I just overwhelmed myself with so much data that I was drawing blanks when it came to picking my teams. So even though that's genuine information, it's real, it exists, it's just a little bit too much, and I'm not wired that way. Guys that are out there do a way better job constructing rosters that are able to take that information, condense it, break it down, and generate their cheat sheets. It was just a little bit, like I said, too much and overwhelming for me, where I wanted to have a more simple approach. I do like target share, obviously. Range of outcomes as far as receptions, very important. And I look for that in running backs later on in the draft. So if I found that less is better for me, but I understand why guys take all that information into account. And as I said, they just do a better job of constructing their rosters.
How about you, Dan? Is there anything
Yes.
you're looking at in particular?
So for me, I mean, especially with receivers, I'm definitely looking at targets, and not only what did they get last year, but what do I think they can get this year? Because targets drive points. I'm looking for receivers who have earned large target shares, all those kind of things. And efficiency, I only look at it in as far as I'm like, how repeatable is this? Either in a good way or a bad way. Famously, I'm a Cole Kmet guy, and you look at him, he scored was it 1 or 0 TDs last year.
Yep.
And that's. Yet he was number 8 in number of targets for a tight end. And you look at the offense this year, and there's no reason why he wouldn't be heavily targeted again. And the TDs is just I think what he got last year was just bad luck. He's much more likely on that number of targets to end up with 5+ TDs. And you add those things together, make him Fields a little bit more efficient. You can tell yourself the story of how Kmet gets there and becomes a top 6, top 8 tight end. And that's the kind of thing I want to do. Is I want to see if there are ways I can tell myself a story that this whatever player is going to get to an elite outcome. And that's mostly what I'm looking for. And that's where I use those statistics, is just to try to paint my picture of how is this guy going to get there. Or sometimes I end up painting the other picture where it's, I'm like, I just don't see how he can get where he got last year. I don't see how he can get there again. It was just too fluky. And then, I'll move them way down on my list.
I want to add this too, Theo, to Dan. One thing Dan got me looking at, and I'm still not good at it. I still lazy out and go to Dan and ask him, but he's good at looking at contract situations. And that is really good to help make decisions, especially this time of year. And even the earlier drafts, that's something that I always went to Dan for some reference, and he's good at getting that information and using it properly.
Dan can tell you off the top of his head contract situations for pretty much anybody.
Pretty much,
going in the top 120 of.
Don't put me on the spot today. I haven't thought about football for about 2.5 weeks. So
sport track.
Yeah.
And I'll add that I like. I think Tommy had a great point that as fantasy football gets more and more popular, and the high stakes games get more popular, the best ball games get more popular. You can have an information overload. We have easy access to stats and metrics that maybe years and years ago you had to really know where to search for. Now you can find them on 5 sites. So I think that you don't want to overwhelm yourself with sources this time of year. Like, filter it out, have a couple of things you trust in terms of, ways to do your research. Don't get overwhelmed by it. You're still drafting great football players that are going to see touches and opportunities. And I'll add one other thing that I like to track in the offseason is vacated targets. I know that some people don't love the vacated targets because offenses change year to year, but I think it's a great way to find some value. So I'm always trying to look at that vacated target list.
Muzio is big on that. He's big on
Muzio's like Dan with the contracts when it comes to vacated targets. He can tell you, who's available, which team. It's not like Brand Man with him.
Yeah, I guess one other thing I'd say there are a ton of statistics, as Tommy was talking about, out there, and most of them I ignore because most of them just aren't predictive at all. They're just descriptive of what happened last year, and I don't really need that necessarily. I would just want to look at things that I find to be more predictive, and and then look at situations and how I think the offense is going to come together this year. And then just kind of mash all that together to figure out who I really like.
Agreed.
And Tommy, you built your winning rosters last year with an emphasis at the wide receiver positions, Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp. Talk about the appeal, and you basically used I would call it a modified 0 RB type build. It was either that or kind of leaning towards a true 0 RB in certain situations. Can you talk about using that strategy with great success?
Yeah, so I found that that's the strategy that gives me the best chance at very minimum to compete in these higher stakes leagues. You guys had a guest on a few weeks ago, Sean Siegel, who completely changed the way that I draft. Reading his articles over the years, it wasn't necessarily the strategy, it was the message that was in between the lines that I took from that and tried to apply with my rosters immediately after reading those articles. When I first started participating in fantasy in high stakes leagues, I always thought that, roster construction should be my quarterback versus yours. And my quarterback needs to be better. My running back needs to be better. My receiver, and so on and so on. But it's not about that. That's a trap. And you'll more or less be a bottom feeder if that's how you draft, or in the middle somewhere. And it's not going to get you anywhere. So immediately after reading his article, I started incorporating a wide receiver heavier base team. And it was immediately followed, not necessarily success from where I was winning anything, but my teams were just better. The output was better. They were stronger. And I really thought there was something to that. And then as the years went by, I just felt more comfortable with it. I felt like the point output was there to compete. And I think it was, fast forwarding it to 2019, where that's where the running backs started coming back into play. David Johnson was the first rounder, Connor, Chris Carson was coming up. I think Miles Sanders was the darling pick that year. And I deviated from the wide receiver heavy teams and bought into this running back build. Horrible. Big mistake. Not to say that you can't find success with it. There are other guys out there that may know how to draft better when they have those running back builds. But after that season, I said, no, I'm going back to the 0 RB approach. I feel more confident doing that. I feel like I have a better handle on those players and made it a point to stick to it. I don't think there's a true definition to the 0 RB strategy. I think there are many different variations of it. And you have to find a comfort zone. And I think it was after the 2020 season, that summer heading into 2021, That's where I thought I had a good handle on it and what I wanted to do and how to build the roster. And that was, not getting too cute with your first round pick, sticking to the player that you want, having a contingency plan, but mainly getting the guy that you want, and the tight end. That was the biggest thing that I got from all this. That tier is so small and so thin that I want one of the best guys at that position, because only one guy wins your league. And if you're fortunate enough to make the playoff bracket, you want to compete. You just don't want a mediocre guy that's going to, keep you afloat and you're settling for mediocrity. I want a dominant guy at that position. So those are the two positions that I really wanted to focus on. And, I had some success there.
You certainly did. And Dan, I think, like you said, there's no true definition of the zero RB build. I think Dan Williamson might have had the best definition I've heard of anybody say in fantasy. Dan, you consider it to be where you filled your positions and your flex before you touch the RB spot. Is that how you would define it still, or is there anything more nuanced?
Yeah, basically at the minimum, I think, what that means is your wide receivers are filled, your flexes are filled, probably your tight end is filled, maybe your quarterback is filled before you start touching running back. So that usually means you're taking your first running back, and if you take one in round 6, I think it qualifies. I think it's 6, 7, something like that is kind of where it goes for me, especially in the NFFC where you've got 3 wide receivers, 1 flex. So that's 4 right there, and then you got a tight end. Maybe you add another wide receiver. Or maybe you add your quarterback, however you want to go about it. But, you've probably drafted at least 5 players before you get to your running back, and usually sometimes even 6. What do you do, Tommy? Or usually draft 5 or 6 or something like that before you get to running back, or how far do you go?
Yeah, honestly, to echo your words, I specifically like to target wide receivers and a tight end with my first 5 picks. And then I'll start looking into running backs from 6 to 10. That's where I want to smash my running backs. But to your point, once the 6th round comes around and there's a quarterback that's falling that I think is a superior play, I'll even deviate from taking a running back at that point and grab that quarterback and then focus on my running backs from 7 to 10 or 7 to 11 in those rounds for sure.
Yeah, and I think the NFFC also, you can. The hero RB and the zero RB are very appealing because you have to fill the 3 wide receiver spots and the flex. And Dan and I have talked about this. You really can't recover at wide receiver in the NFFC. How many waiver wire usable guys show up at wide receiver spot throughout the year? Justin Jefferson and Chase Claypool showed up in a couple of my leagues when they were rookies because they started slow. Somebody cut them. You get guys like Travis Fulgham get pushed up in the amount of fab you're going to have to pay for them. And occasionally you get, I just remember when Judy goes down, KJ Hamler, people were going crazy with the fab. Like, wide receivers are so necessary in that format. And I think it's a strategy you definitely can win with. It's got a lot. There's a lot of people that don't like the strategy, but I think when you put together a monster, you can have a real monster when you do it, huh?
For sure. And what it's not for everyone, right? And that's what makes fantasy football fun. You have complete control of your roster. You're drafting based on what you think is going to give you the best chance to win. And to your point, Theo, this strategy is not for everyone. And immediately after the draft, you already know that you need to hit on a waiver wire or 2 just to compete. But that also goes for the other 11 guys. They need to hit on a waiver as well to sustain any success that they may be experiencing during the course of the season. So no, it depends. A lot of guys are uncomfortable with it, but I just found where at minimum, it's giving me the best chance to compete.
Shout out to I'm sorry, JD. Shout out to Stearns in the chat. Do you ever deviate? You say you like to go tight end, get a very strong tight end with your builds. Will you ever hop into like the Kelsey and I mean we'll talk about him in a little bit. The Mandrews tier right now, Kyle Pitts, a little higher up tight end than maybe what you were drafting last year, where you had great success with Andrews as tight end 6.
Well, we can use last year as an example. So Kelsey was going in the first round, late first round, and many drafts. But he wasn't my tight end 1 going into the draft. It was Mark Andrews. So I'm just referencing simple ADP. Andrews is living in the 5th round and Kelsey's going 1. So right off the bat, that's extreme value for me. Now, you're not going to get Andrews in the 5th round this year. That's just not going to happen. So you need to reevaluate that whole process over again. And, to your point, Kyle Pitts is a guy that I am targeting, and he seems to be in the 3rd round now. He's dropping a little bit, and I think a lot of that has to do with, Ritter challenging Mariota now. At least that's some of the reports coming out. But I will be extremely aggressive with the tight end, no question. And I'm probably going to pass on the Kelsey in the 1st round, 2nd round, as well as Andrews. But once that 3rd round comes, and depending on how the draft is unfolding and what guys are doing, next to me, it's definitely a position I'll be aggressive on for sure.
All right, guys, let me do a quick plug. We'll get back to Tommy dropping some serious goatness tonight. Guys, we're talking about big money tournaments. There are a ton right now in the FFPC. You can play for up to $1 million, $500,000, 10 grand, 35 grand. You got all kinds of levels of buy-ins. Sign up now to the site. Send us your username and email, and we'll hook you up with a sign-up bonus of $35 credit you can use. They got $35 best ball drafts, including a super flex best ball tournament right now that you can enter for $35 and win yourself 10 Genos.
We talked a little bit. You just talked about Kyle Pitts. Last year, you were able to identify Mark Andrews correctly, way ahead of ADP as a huge value. So when you're evaluating the tight end position, do you want to get the number 1 target on the team? If they're filling in like the alpha, receiver 1, but they're playing the tight end position, or do you ever want to, deviate from that and occasionally look at maybe a 2nd or 3rd option tight end who's, appealing because of his skill set or the offense itself?
Going into the draft season, I already have a guy or 2 in mind, and depending on what the ADP is telling me, that's going to be the difference for me on which one of those guys it is that I'm going to be aggressively targeting. So, for example, Andrews is going in the 2nd round this year. It's a little too rich for me, but it's somewhat justifiable because of what he can potentially do. And what he did last year was with 3 different quarterbacks. We can't forget about that. And he's going to have a little bit more of a balanced offense, I think, this year, but still going to pass up on him. I do like Pitts a lot, but you have to have a contingency plan because he's going to be on everyone's radar. And a guy that's coming up right behind him, I think, that has upside is a guy like TJ Hawkinson. So his ADP is a little bit later than Pitts, but I think Pitts is the superior talent. So I'll potentially reach for him a little bit because I want to catch that upside. And I rather catch that upside on my team than watching someone else do it because they were more aggressive with the player that I had in mind. So I'll certainly put more emphasis on the tight end that I view as tight end 1, which I have no problem revealing. It's definitely Pitts.
And then Dan, I just want to Dan is we call him the tight end whisperer in the GOAT district. And I've drafted with Dan many times. He's I respect his opinion on tight ends as much as anybody in the industry. Dan, how do you go about and find you're not necessarily an early tight end guy, but you're able to find value at the tight end position. How do you find value for guys where maybe others don't see it? A guy that might be, past tight end 12 that becomes kind of appealing in your eyes. Last year, Gronk helped you get to an early start in a bunch of leagues, and you got him a tremendous value all summer long before, and I'll add, before the Thursday night explosion. So how did you go about doing that? And you've shared Kmet all offseason as one of your guys, but taking Kmet out of the equation, is there anything that you're really looking at in identifying talent at that position?
Yeah, so again, I'm kind of looking at targets as being a prime mover at the tight end position. I want a tight end who's really who's going to be no worse than the 3rd option in the passing offense, and if I can find one who might be the 2nd option in the passing offense, that's even better. So that way I can look at some of those mid to late round guys, that maybe everybody else is passing up on. And then I'll take a look at, like tight ends who've moved to an offense that's more tight end friendly than the one they were in before. Like Evan Ingram is a perfect late target because everybody loves to bag on Ingram. I mean, that's like if fantasy players are running out of things to talk about, they'll just bag on Ingram for a while. And, but the thing is, he's moved to Jacksonville where they've got Doug Peterson as head coach, who has a history of using tight ends a lot. Trevor Lawrence threw to his tight end a ton. Ingram, the past 2 years, has been stuck in New York with the Giants, where he had Jason Garrett just totally misusing him. Not playing
low A dot Evan Ingram.
Yeah, exactly. He's not. They didn't have him running up the seam or anything like that. So I look at the confluence of all those things, and I'm like, yeah, this is a guy that I definitely want to take a shot on. And I'll have a tendency, like if I feel real good about my wide receivers, my running backs, my quarterback, and I'll often just I'll punt tight end because I want to get strong at those positions, and then I'll grab 2 or 3 of those guys, the Kmets, the Ingrams, Gerald Everett, would be another one, but guys like that I think can vastly outproduce their position. Maybe they're not going to get up into the the top 3 or 4, but if they can be a back end tight end, top 10 tight end, and I'm strong everywhere else, I'm going to be happy with that.
And I will say that I like to be fluid in my approach with the tight end position. I had some successful teams where I've gone early tight end. I've had some successful teams where I've waited on tight end. And right now, I'm in 2 slow football guys. One of them I took Mark Andrews in the early second, and then another one I haven't taken a tight end, and it's round 10. So I think you have to be comfortable with different ways to do it, and as long as you pick the right players, any strategy works, right, JD?
Oh yeah. I'm liking my pits on my football guys that I'm building right now. Pits and it's for me. I'm like Theo. I like to switch up my builds. I have preferences definitely, but if a guy slips to me, like Dawson Knox was slipping in that draft, I didn't think I'd take my second tight end so quick. But now I've got Knox in the 9th round. I'll probably not take another one unless something really good falls with it, which I don't. But I think you can switch around your builds. And I like what you said earlier, Tommy, with the NFC, how no matter where your position is in the draft, the way the builds are, the way the format is, you can really build a winner from any spot, which is nice, and with any kind of build, right?
Absolutely. I think the balance between the picks, between your strategy, you can neutralize almost what anybody else is potentially doing and put a contender in on your own. I that's why I love the format so much. I've conditioned to it, and I just think you have an edge no matter. And the best part is you could dictate where you want to draft as well. If you want to stay in the beginning of the draft, you can position yourself to try and draft from the beginning, or if you prefer the end with the 3rd round reversal, you have that option.
Yeah, it's an awesome format for sure.
Let me follow that up, Tommy. Where is there any place that's looking especially sweet to you right now as far as draft position?
Yes, obviously you want to try and position yourself to take one of the big 4 receivers, especially since I'm a receiver heavy kind of a guy. I'm okay if I pass up on Kupp and Jefferson, just so I can lock in one of the other 2 on the way back, just to have the opportunity to pick before those guys that have Kupp or Jefferson and try and, really hit a home run with my 2nd round pick. So I would say, between 3 and 6 is where I'm looking at this year.
No, I will say that it's for me, like NFFC, the KDS, I like to try to mix it up, but I will say sometimes it's very appealing to get that 12, 13 and then come back and pick at 25. That's sometimes I really love my teams when I'm able to draft from that spot. So it's an awesome format for sure. We got to get to the running backs though, guys. We're already 45 minutes in.
Let's do a quick chat question. Matthew Bingham asking about Tommy's do not draft list. If you have a guy or two, he's asking guys coming off of injuries. Are there guys you're avoiding?
At any position?
Sure. Or you could do running back since Theo wants to do running back.
I could potentially give two. One guy that's on my fade list is Tyreek Hill, despite the fact that he's a receiver.
Interesting.
I don't care where he is in the draft. He could drop to me in the 3rd round. It's just not happening. It's not anything to do with his talent. It's just that he fits this diva role perfectly. And he's doing a lot of chirping in the offseason. And I just feel like it's unnecessary, especially with what Miami's trying to do. Like, they're trying to build something there with their own players. They have the foundation. They're building the blocks up, and they want Hill to be a part of it. And he still can't get his head out of Kansas City. So little things like that will distract me enough to not want to draft that player. And as far as a running back goes, Derrick Henry, definitely a fade for me. I think that the Titans are telling you they're going through a rebuild. Henry's 28 years old. They have Tannehill throwing the ball. They got rid of A.J. Brown. There's really nobody on that team that's an alpha that's scaring you. They addressed the wide receiver position, who I absolutely love, Burks, but there's a little uncertainty with him right now. So I think that the Titans are telling you we went through a rebuild without saying it. So for that reason, Henry's definitely a fade for me.
No doubt. So you got Tommy's Kyle Pitts. If you're keeping track of this, you got the Kyle Pitts, and we're fading Derrick Henry.
You are on the clock.
And JD's on the clock. let's
I was gonna say, I know that's not me. So
I'm definitely on the clock, but I'm in slow drafts right now, so I'm probably on the clock in like five drafts right now, Dan. So it's getting ugly this week, a lot of them. Let's just dive into the running backs. We're looking to identify some values in these running backs like rounds 3 and beyond. We're going to look at the dead zone running backs. We're going to go deeper than the dead zone, and we're going to talk about guys, and we're going to cover a lot. We'll start out with the biggest riser right now, besides Saquon Barkley, at the running back position is Travis Etienne. In NFFC drafts, and I'm charting ADP that anybody listening can pull this up. It's drafts from June 20th on in the online championship NFFC drafts. So Travis Etienne's going as running back 17 and 33rd overall in NFFC. I've seen him go even higher in FFPC drafts. I've seen him go in the mid-second. I've seen him go right at the 2-3 turn. Guys, does he have league-winning upside at this range of the draft? Tommy, Dan, JD, anybody hop in for this one? Start with you.
I don't know if I'd call it league winning. I mean, I think that when he was going in the 5th round, you could call that a little bit more league winning. At this point, he's been chased up to about as high as I want to spend a pick on him. I will probably try to have a couple shares just to have a couple shares, but I'm not going to chase him up much higher than this.
What about you, Tommy?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Fortunately, I have an easier out with ETN because I'm not looking at a running back. So that decision is made for me, which is great. However, he still has the cleanest uniform in the league, so to speak. He hasn't been on the field. So we don't even know what he truly is. And at the end of the day, he's on the Jaguars. So that team needs to sustain drives, keep him on the field. That defense needs to get off the field to get the offense more opportunities, have time of possession on their side, and that's a balance. And the Jaguars just haven't displayed that. They're a young team. They're up and coming. I love the potential, but that he's really going to have some sort of magical season to justify that pick. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, for sure. And I think like Dan made a great point. Like he was more appealing a couple rounds ago. I still really like the talent. And I'll say this. I think that he does have a high receiving upside. So when you add his speed and his receiving upside, he's definitely he might end up being somewhat of a purgatory player when he's getting taken in that range of drafts more than a guy who's just going to beat ADP. But he's okay. What do you guys think the over/under is for his ADP for the first couple of main event drafts, Dan? Where do you think you see him going?
I don't think he's going to get pushed up too much higher, because just kind of looking at where he's at in relation to the other running backs.
OTC guys, Etienne or Chubb?
ETN.
ETN. I just can't do Chubb.
If they had Deshaun Watson, if they had Deshaun Watson, that's another conversation.
What about DeAndre Swift? DeAndre Swift, Etienne.
Swift all day and twice on Sunday.
And I think that's where it's going to stop, in my opinion, unless something happens, an injury or something like that ahead of him.
I can't see ETN really breaking past, like 11 or 12, and right now he's at 16 for running backs. And they're, like Akers or ETN. I think I'd rather have Akers. Connor, ETN. I think I'd rather have Connor. I
think Javonte or ETN might end up being
that could
the guys
be,
that converge. That could be interesting. Okay, so we got through ETN. What about, we've had 2 back-to-back seasons where a rookie running back finished in the top 7 at the position. James Robinson, Najee Harris, both smashed. Does Breece Hall make it 3 in a row? And I'll take a step back. Is he an appealing pick at 40 overall in the early 4th round? We took it to we talked to Glenn Lowy last night. We said, does he finish as a top 15 back? So I don't want to make it easy. Top 7's tough. Does Breece Hall finish inside the top 15? Start with Tommy.
I absolutely think he can. The Jets are very interesting, and they have a different feel this year. There's a lot of speed on that team. They do need someone that's going to stay on the field for 3 downs potentially and plug it in at the goal line. This is where Michael Carter had a hard time last year. So I think by default, Breece Hall is going to give you that opportunity. Not only do I think he could be finish as a top 10 back, I think he could be a first rounder next year.
Yes.
That's the kind of upside that he has. But again, not to, beat a dead horse with it, but he's going in that 4th round, maybe 5th if he falls, where I'm not quite looking at the running back position. So those decisions are going to be made for me, and I'm okay living with that. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. I'd have a hard time putting him in the top 7 for the season. But I think if Breece Hall has a good year, there's a very good possibility that when we're coming down the stretch and, the money's on the line, he's playing like a top 7 running back.
Yeah, I think that's like Dan nailed it. Like when you're taking a Breece Hall, you're thinking about like the end game because his role can grow, and also I think that again, like ETN, he's young and dynamic, and he has great receiving ability, and I hope that the Jets utilize that. I'm not a Jets fan, but I live in Jets country. I'd love to see the Jets have a winner. People are starving, and I want to see. And I'll get my kid a Breece Hall jersey if he's a baller, 100%. Rapid fire, these 2 guys are a little more boring, but they're going in the same range. In or out on David Montgomery or Zeke Elliott in this range? They're going to disappoint, or they're going to meet expectations, or are they a potential target? JD?
Sorry, you said Montgomery and who?
Montgomery and Zeke.
Yeah, I'm off of Zeke. Personally, I sprinkled maybe just a tiny percentage just to say I have 1 or 2, but I'm more of a Pollard guy at his ADP, especially with my builds. Montgomery's a guy I don't mind. Funny enough, I think I was telling you in the football guys that I'm doing, again, kind of similar to Tommy, because I went with my receivers and tight ends early. Montgomery in the 5th, I grabbed just as my RB1 just to get, he's kind of my hero RB with this build. And then I'm just stacking guys later. So again, it really depends on the build. To be honest, I'm not huge on Montgomery. Again, I prefer actually Khalil Herbert at his EDP, especially with what we saw last year. So again, it just really depends on the build. They're not 2 guys that I'm heavily invested in. Again, like Tommy, I prefer the receivers around there, especially guys like Bateman and you got like the
Sutton.
Those. I was just gonna say the Denver guys.
Dan.
Yeah, same. I'd much rather take a receiver. Like in my dynasty teams, I've got some David Montgomery, and I'm not worried about him. I'm totally fine hanging on to him. But when I'm looking at, who I could get in a draft at receiver around there, I could get McLaurin, I could get Allen Robinson, I could get DJ Moore, DK Metcalf. I'd rather have all those guys than Montgomery or Zeke. So that's a perfect spot where I'm pivoted over to wide receiver. I might take a look at a tight end. I'll see what quarterbacks are available, but I'm probably not going with those guys on a in an NFFC, online or prime time or any of that.
And Tommy, I know you're not going to draft either one of these guys, but do you think the ADP is justified for where they're going?
I think, I'm not even sure Zeke is the best running back on that team. So he's an
100%.
easy pass. And as far as Montgomery goes, I want it to be Montgomery, but the Bears need to show some more continuity on offense. They need to sustain drives. To Dan's point with Cole Kmet, if Cole Kmet's having that kind of a season, it's showing that the offense is capable of having some sort of balance. So I would lean to Montgomery if I had to make that call, but I'm glad that I don't have to make either of those calls because there's just so much upside in that round or those next 2 rounds with the receivers that it's an easy call.
Yeah, and I'll kind of echo a little bit of what JD said, where I think that we saw David Montgomery get a heavy workload the last 2 seasons with a different coaching staff. So I think that Eberflus is coming in there. They're going to do some different things with Fields, and it would be interesting if they mixed in the backups a little bit more. I will say just to point it out, we did have Heath Cummings on from CBS, and David Montgomery was one of his league winners, but he doesn't have a whole lot of love in the fantasy community otherwise. Tommy, you took Josh Jacobs last year. Actually, we'll save the Josh Jacobs one. We're going to go before that. This is actually one that's tough. You have running backs going in the 50s and 60s of ADP, all going between 50 and let's call it 65. J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, Elijah Mitchell, and A.J. Dillon. All of these guys are younger backs with a lot of positives and certainly a lot of negatives about their situation. And this is a question for everybody, who is the best bet to return value here among Dobbins, Gibson, Mitchell, and A.J. Dillon? And who would be the player of those 4 that you would be looking to avoid?
So when I saw this question earlier, I knew this was going to be a tell because I personally have A.J. Dillon in my top 10 running backs.
Nice.
I think that he is going to explode. I think that he's going to have a great year. And that's not saying or suggesting that he's going to bench Aaron Jones. I think the two are going to coexist. I do feel like they could both represent the top 15. But I just think that A.J. Dillon, he's going to have a monster season. I love what the Packers are almost telling you. They're almost having an audition for their wide receivers. So they're going to run the football at the beginning of the year, in my opinion. So I'm extremely confident in A.J. Dillon. I love where he's going in drafts. And the fact that I have him so high, I will certainly be a little bit more bullish on him. And as far as avoiding one of those, it's probably Dobbins, but not because of lack of talent or opportunity. It's just the injury. And I'm hearing that he's not going to be 100% at the start of camp, maybe even in the early part of the season. So they're going to ease him in. And, that could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month. And you don't want to invest in that kind of a player as your RB1 or 2, knowing that can be a potential range of outcome. So definitely fade Dobbins for me.
Dan's another Dillon guy. Who you got of this tier?
Definitely Dillon. Yeah, I'm in for all the same reasons Tommy is. And also I like the fact that Green Bay didn't really shy away from throwing him some passes last year. And, so I think given the condition of their wide receiver core and the fact that you've got, like Tanyan may not be ready for the start of the season, that's another reason why you could be looking at a fast start from these running backs. So give me Aaron Jones, give me A.J. Dillon. I'll take either one at ADP. And I think my fade is probably going to be it's probably Gibson. I don't really foresee myself having a lot of Dobson, Gibson, or Mitchell. Really, there are things about each of those guys I just don't like that well.
JD?
Yeah, same. Especially when you can get Dillon like a round or a bit later than those guys. He offers you the upside. What did you call Tommy earlier? The fresh. That with Etienne, he's got the freshest jersey on the field or something like that. I love that. I might use that. But A.J. Dillon just offers you that upside. We haven't seen the full potential there just because of the opportunities with Jones. I love Dillon, man. I just stacked him with Aaron Jones in one of these super flex best balls on FFPC, getting him in the 8th round. I think is beauty. I mean, the other guys, I'm not completely avoiding, but they're kind of like the Zeke where like I prefer them over Zeke, but I'll like sprinkle a bit of them here and there depending on my builds. But they're not guys I'm necessarily target. I did like Dobbins a lot more before all the latest, like Tommy's saying, it's there's way too much out there right now saying he might not be in for a bit in the beginning of the season. And that's kind of scary, you know, with the investment that you have to make in the 5th round.
Yeah, he's a wait and see guy for me. I want to see, you know, how he seems to be feeling in training camp. I mean, I don't think we're going to see much on the field in the preseason at all. So it's really going to be just kind of, you know, how are the coaches talking about him in training camp, and how are they talking about the running back position in general? He's a guy I could see myself jumping back in on if I'm hearing the right things, but you know, I don't know if I'm going to hear those things.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting tier. I really like AJ Dillon. I think JD had a great point that he's a little cheaper, especially in FFPC. It's even a little bit more. I don't want to say I'm completely out on Antonio Gibson. I do think he might get pushed down to like the 7th round, and he might get down.
I'm waiting for that. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and I think like we talk about, you know, you don't hate players, you hate ADPs. So like he could get down to a point, especially with all the Brian Robinson talk. There's some very sharp people that are continually drafting Brian Robinson right now. So a lot of people betting against Antonio Gibson. I don't want to say I'm out completely, but right now it is current ADP. I'm out on Dobbins for the same reasons. I'm in on Dillon, and I'm also more bullish on Elijah Mitchell than you guys are. I think that Mitchell, there's red flags. Shout out to Matt Schauf, who's been on the GOAT District Draft Sharks guy, talked about how every single running back who sees this kind of volume for a Shanahan coach team in San Francisco has seen less the next year. So there's like trends that support this. You have the potential injury, but he did have the cleanup surgery in the offseason. I just think that there's a chance that Mitchell can just absolutely smash and get you to a point, you know, where you might have such a great start in your league that you might be able to put up with, you know, him not playing a full load. And he's cheap enough where the price is kind of baked in. I think if he had no injury concerns, despite Tyrion Davis price, he'd be going a little higher. So I don't want to be completely out on Mitchell, but it's probably Dillon for me, the one I like the most, with some Mitchell sprinkled in. Tommy, you took Josh Jacobs last year. He was in one of your championship rosters. Does he have any appeal at running back 25, 67 overall? Does he at least fill a need structurally? Do you at least think that let's put it like this. Do you think it becomes a running back by committee in Vegas as well? Or is he kind of appealing there and you think that that's kind of overblown?
There's a lot going on there. And the first thing that jumped out at me was they didn't sign him to the 5th-year option. Now, I found that rather surprising because they're clearly telling you that they want to contend with the addition of Adams. They're getting Waller back. I personally don't think they're the weakest team in that division. I think they want to attempt to contend at least for a playoff spot. So it's interesting because if they have Zamir White coming in, who I absolutely like, as at minimum a handcuff, but because of the uncertainty with his role now, there's a chance that Jacobs can become sour with his usage. And because of that and the Josh McDaniels offense, I think he's going to lean more towards Zamir White, and things are going to be a little bit disgruntled perhaps, especially if the team starts slow out of the gate. So as much as I loved Jacobs last year, I drafted him twice. He was my RB target. I'm going to avoid him this year just because of the uncertainty of those things that, you know, I just mentioned. And they're going to have an audition for this running back spot, not only for this year, but for the future. So they want to see what they have on this roster. And unfortunately, Jacobs becomes expendable then. So I think there's going to be a transition at that position as early as this year.
I think that it's kind of like Jacobs he's one of these guys that I've seen him fall to almost the 7th round. And it's kind of like, please fall on this Jacobs grenade for me from your rest of your league mates, where it's like, you're like, oh my gosh, I can get this starting running back. And I think that I agree with you, Tommy. I think that it's going to be a running back by committee. I think that the passing volume is going to go up. They had Devontae Adams. They paid Renfro a fortune. And as long as Waller's on the field, he's going to see targets. So I think it's going to be like, it's going to be a little bit more pass heavy Josh McDaniels offense than, you know, ground and pound McDaniels offense. So I'm out on Jacobs.
How is it that Hubbard puts it? A bad pick in a certain round is still a bad pick 3 rounds later. It's just that it's a little bit easier to try to convince yourself it's a good pick. He says it a lot more eloquently than I could, but that's basically what it is.
I timed out in an FFWC draft a best ball I was doing with Billy Muzio and Glenn Lowy, and I ended up with Josh Jacobs. And Billy makes the joke that that's what people that time out at picks, they deserve Josh Jacobs on your roster for timing out and making everybody wait around for you. Thought that was one of the jokes of the summer. JD, have you fallen on that grenade at all in your best ball drafts?
No, I'm again similar to Tommy. Last year, I loved Jacobs. He was at a really nice value, especially just what he was offering, the opportunity in that offense. Nothing much behind him. I'm not a big Drake guy. And this year, like we talked about these guys that he's going around, it's really hard for me to take him in these rounds where especially with the receivers that are going around him. And the uncertainty with the new regime again, is big for me with most likely avoiding Jacobs. And I like Zamir White. I mean, how can you not at his price in the 14th round?
And I will say that like a bunch of the running backs we're about to talk about are more appealing to me than Jacobs, especially when price is considered. Let's jump into 2 of them.
Here's my bold prediction. Somehow, some way, by late August, early September, Zamir White will have jumped Josh Jacobs in ADP.
Damn it! Wow. Now you're gonna make it happen way sooner because just like Theo did with Etienne, man. Etienne, as soon as Theo started talking to Etienne, he went 3 rounds.
Say hello to 11th round Zamir White tomorrow in a couple of football rounds. Thanks to the overhyped sleeper. We have 2 guys, CEH and Miles Sanders, who are more likely than not with CEH, the starting running backs in very good offenses. And they're 2 former first-round fantasy draft picks. Now you're finding these guys in round 6 and 7. Miles Sanders, who today said, "Don't draft me," basically in fantasy, said he doesn't care about fantasy at all. Basically it was a very honest but very weird interview. If anybody hasn't seen it, he's getting more steam. Like I feel like Sanders is getting pushed up, and CEH is falling a little bit. As you know, there's the Rojo and McKinnon situation in Kansas City. People are less bullish on CH than they were maybe 2 weeks ago. Are we looking to add or fade these players in the 6th and 7th round? Tommy?
As far as CEH goes, he's definitely a player that I'm targeting in that very round. For one of the reasons that you just mentioned, he's on a very high-scoring team. And I personally feel like the Chiefs need him. They need his scoring output. They need his skill set. We all know who Ronald Jones is at this point. I don't think he's going to surprise anyone. And as far as McKinnon goes, I think he's more of a threat than Ronald Jones, just based on the PPR opportunity, this, that, and the other. So I think CEH was going in the 3rd round last year. So I think that alone is going to scare off more drafters, and he's going to fall even more potentially and become even more of a value. Therefore, if he's going to be identified as a dart play on a team that could, make a run at a Super Bowl in that division that needs to score points, I'll take that floor any day with a player with that upside. And he had an injury last year, and he was forthcoming with it, and he was certainly labored by that injury. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And with his cost this year in the 7th round, I think it's a good gamble.
And Miles Sanders?
I think he's a good contingency plan if you don't get CEH. I think either or in that round will work out just as good as the other. I like Sanders. The Eagles, they had a little bit of an underrated running game last year. I think they averaged over 4 yards a carry. Sanders was a big part of that. And I just love the makeup of that offense. I think A.J. Brown's going to, release a lot of the defensive fronts that are going to be present. Plus, Hurts could run the ball as well. He's a threat. And I think Sanders is going to have a nice opportunity to outproduce his ADP as well.
Dan?
Yeah, pretty much what Tommy said. I mean, I'm pretty much in on Allaire at his price. Sanders, it takes a little bit more work for me to get there, but he's going cheaper, so that's fine. Sanders last year, he he had really terrible touchdown luck. So, so that's something I would expect would probably rebound. But I worry about, it could be a 3-headed backfield with, and then with Jalen Hurts as somebody who's siphoning off a huge amount of the rushing work before you even get to those 3 running backs. Because I think Boston Scott, I think they like him. I think they're going to use him. Gainwell, I think they're going to use him, and so you heard Sanders today was kind of, wistfully saying, I wish I could get some more opportunities. And I think he's a guy that if he does get those opportunities, he's going to do pretty well. So I definitely want to have a little bit of Sanders going for me, but price wise, I'm going to be trying to hit my spots where he's going, just a little bit past ADP.
JD.
Yeah, I might hit CH if I'm doing a KC stack. He's not someone I'm necessarily targeting. I actually prefer Ronald Jones, to be honest, at his price. He's actually creeping up, so he's kind of getting, my deodorant example. When you pay $3.99, you're not going to pay $8.99 for that same deodorant, right? The next week, you're going to go to Walmart and try to find it at the same price. But with Miles Sanders, I guess my issue is, like, what are we expecting from him? Because he's been at best an RB2, right? Like a back end RB2. I don't know that he gets past a lot of these guys that are going ahead of him, depending on how you feel. We talked about Jacobs and, Mitchell and some of those guys. Maybe I just don't see. I don't know. We talked about it a couple shows ago, Theo. It's really hard for me with Sanders. I love Sanders. When he came into the league, he was one of my favorite guys, one of my favorite running backs. I love the catching ability, and I love the offense. Let's just see if he can put it together health-wise. He's another guy that, he's played 12 games, 2 seasons. 16-1, and at best we've seen at RB 17.
So I'm full. This is like the part if we were a financial show. I have to say, like, full disclosure. Full discllosure.
I love that in your article, by the way, Theo.
Yes.
But check out Theo's article, guys. We tweeted it out today.
I appreciate that, JD. I had a running back article on Player Profiler, which I talked about a few of these guys, but I did actually take Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And then I added Ronald Jones, which I know in a tournament setting is oftentimes frowned upon to do the handcuffing. But I think it's so cheap. Like McKinnon, Tommy brings up, but McKinnon's not taking goal line. One of those guys is going to get the goal line opportunities. CEH has not really seen many opportunities in his entire career inside the 5-yard line. I wonder if that's goes to Ronald Jones. But anyway, I think they're cheap enough that you can draft both of them this time of year in like the 7th and 11th, the 6th and 10th, somewhere in that range. I don't want to do that every draft, but I did that with this one to pair with Patrick Mahomes, so I have a little bit of Chiefs action. So I'm not out. I'm going to take him in at times. Sanders, I think, will be the same way. I don't want to have 0, but I'm not as excited about Sanders as some people. I just think you can't deny the fact that it's a Kansas City running back going this cheap. We've been willing to take shots on it so much earlier, and now they're finally and I realize, the Kansas City offense could regress, but it's still Patrick Mahomes' offense. We've seen, Darrell Williams have success as the RB1 certain weeks. So I think that, getting a piece of that this late is something you can't have.
They have
0.
a super favorable schedule as well. KC, one of the most favorables when you're looking at like 50-point games. Great article on RotoViz. Pretty sure it's RotoViz right now where they've got. It's our buddy PFF.
Okay. Yep.
Dwayne actually put a really good article on some of the rosters, some of the teams with the best schedules this year, but really broke it down like by how many 50-point games they have, looking at over-unders and things like that. So go check that out. Definitely something of quality. Let's answer Matthew Bingham's question. We're talking KC. On the other end, in the NFC, Tommy, why don't you tell us about your thoughts on the Tampa Bay running backs?
That's an interesting situation going on there. In fact, I like it for the opposite end of the spectrum. I think that Tampa is going to be a very pass-heavy offense, so it's an opportunity to take a look at their receivers, being that I'm a receivers kind of a guy. But to answer the question specifically, I love the confidence that Rachaad White is displaying. Not even on the field, obviously. We haven't seen any body of work there, but just the words that he's using. And I'm sure you guys seen the Leonard Fournette pictures. He's looking a little out of shape.
There is one this week where he looks a little bit more in shape.
Was there?
Somebody sent it to me. Somebody sent it to me in the DMs. Actually, one of our friends that we compete with that was not happy about me tweeting a fat Lenny picture. Sent it to me to show that he's looking a little lean out. So I will say it's a better angle. He's wearing black and he's sitting down, so it's a nice angle. But he looks a lot leaner.
My wife caught me expanding the picture of him, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Look at this guy. What happened to him?"
He's a football player, honey.
What's that?
I said he's
enjoying it.
Yeah, he's a pro's pro. I suspect that he's going to be ready. Otherwise, Brady's going to be in his ear. But I really do like Rachaad White, and he's a free look almost. With huge upside. Almost like Michael Carter last year. I thought Michael Carter had a real opportunity to do something, but I knew it was going to take him at least half a season. So if you could apply that same method and strategy with Rachaad White, let him develop on your bench. Don't let him develop on someone else's bench and see what you got there.
10th round, man. 10th round.
There you go.
We're at an hour and 15. You're good on time, Tommy?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So this next one, let's go right around the horn here. Devin Singletary and James Cook are running back 30 for Singletary and running back 36 for James Cook. So we're seeing the ADPs converging. Dan just got like a little sick look in his face because I know which way he's going on this one. But let's go around the horn here. Which one are you on at ADP? And you can add structural context to this, which I'm planning on doing. Tommy, you go ahead first.
I could talk about Devin Singletary for an hour. You sure you want me to start?
You started Devin Singletary on
it's you or me, Tommy. Either one of us is going to go an hour. So.
Okay, so Tommy, you can talk about how the 20 touchdowns Devin Singletary will score this year, and Dan, you can talk about how he's actually going to sap away the receiving work from James Cook, and you guys can just talk Devin Singletary all night. Go for it, Tommy.
First and foremost, I can't believe his ADP on a team like the Buffalo Bills that have this job opening for a running back who showed you what his skill set offers that team. They were more balanced. They were more dynamic. And, he was a big part of why I was able to win. It was the prime time I had him in. And having him down the stretch was huge. So the ultimate answer to that question is you can have both. And I talked about both of them because you can lock down this backfield. And if you take Singletary at his current ADP and want to be a little bit more bullish with James Cook, you have the opportunity. If ADP stays the way it's currently at, there's going to be some movement, obviously, but I absolutely love Singletary. And the fact that he could potentially be your RB1 late in the draft could be explosive. I was talking to a buddy about this, and I used Joe Mixon as an example. When constructing your roster, Joe Mixon's going in the late first, very early second sometimes. If he's going in the first round, I don't need Singletary to outproduce a guy like Mixon. I just want him to neutralize that point output as best as possible. And I think Singletary could do that, not for the duration of a season, but week to week. So I would be extremely happy with Singletary as my RB1 even. But as my RB2, that's huge upside, especially for that team that is showing, no regression whatsoever, at least in my opinion.
Dan, go ahead.
100%. I mean, to me, James Cook feels like a player that was pushed up into the second round by Buffalo's need. They were trying to get McKissick. They missed on getting him. And I think it's also a lot tougher for rookies to come in and just immediately outproduce a quality veteran, which I think Singletary is. He knows that offense better. Next year, would I want Cook or Singletary? It might be a completely different answer. But for this year, I'm taking Singletary all the way. Even if he's more expensive. And as Tommy said, there are ways too that you can just grab both and I did that last year in several drafts with Singletary and Zach Moss. And Zach Moss ended up being a big nothing burger, which was great because that meant after a few weeks, I could
easier to figure out.
Yeah, you just drop him and you move on.
I did the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you can get a player like that you could just drop and move on, that's even better. But yeah, I think Singletary is going to be a force this year. And as Tommy was saying, look at his point output compared to Mixon. If he can just stay somewhere in the ballpark, and you're putting your Singletary up against somebody else's Mixon, Tommy's going to have a wide receiver drafted where Mixon was drafted, which is going to be a probably top 5 wide receiver, and you're going to have a wide receiver drafted, somewhere in the 8th, 9th round. Is that where Cook is going right now?
Yeah, they're very close. FFPC, they're almost equal, and NFFC, they're six running back spots apart. So they're converging for sure.
Right. Yeah. But the thing is, I mean, look at James Cook. He's going at about around pick 100. Call it. And if you look at the wide receivers that are going around pick 100, I'd rather have Devin Singletary plus, that first round wide receiver than have Mixon plus whatever wide receiver I can get around the Singletary to Cook range.
JD, Singletary or Cook?
Yeah, for me, James Cook is.
It's a trap.
We have Noah Riddell come on the show every year and do a trap show. I feel like at that price, guys, RB, let's start at week 15 last year, okay? RB7, RB10, RB5, RB3, RB2, RB4. Sorry, why are we going to replace this in an offense that is just getting better and that's going to do everything they can to win a Super Bowl this year? To me, it's simple math. I was loving Singletary when he was going even later. He was going later in a lot of drafts and then earlier in the offseason. Again, everyone thinking, they're bringing Breece Hall or they're bringing someone to replace him. I don't know. Sounds pretty good to me, man. Those numbers, if you look at his totals over 25, those last weeks. So for me, Singletary's always been the guy, even after James Cook came in. I feel like James Cook at the price might be a trap. At best, he's giving you J.D. McKissick, but I mean, what more could you ask from a guy in Singletary in that offense?
So I'll take a devil's advocate to this. Is I do want some James Cook. I like Singletary as well. I think that the idea of taking both of them is very appealing. Again, some people will say, this is the most square advice to take 2 running backs from the same backfield, but it is a good offense that and we can bet on the Bills as sure as we're sitting here. Even if it goes south, they're a top 8 offense, and they have a great chance of being the best offense in the league. So I think having both is appealing to me, and that's something I would not be scared to do. I will say this: everything that they showed us this past offseason was that they want a back to catch more passes, to take some of the pressure off of Josh Allen and add a dynamic element to their backfield. They tried to get J.D. McKissick. He stayed with Washington. There was rumors they were trying to get Christian McCaffrey. And then they draft James Cook, and we say they overdrafted him, but they still use that equity on him for a team that considers himself a Super Bowl champion. So I'm not out on the fact that I think James Cook could have a real role, and I think they can move him around. And I'll add the structural context to this. If you go with a hero RB approach, and then Singletary is absolutely the pick for you, because he's going to see that early. He's going to be a bridge for you at the very least to get you through that first month, 6 weeks of the season. But if you're a heavy RB drafter, I would be more considered to take James Cook, where you might have a guy whose role grows as the season progresses. So I think there are 2 guys I really would like to take shots on. Let's go to an offense that we're less excited about, but guys that are still being drafted pretty high. Right now, Kenneth Walker is going as RB29 in NFFC, Rashad Penny as RB32. I've seen them flip-flop, though, where you've seen Penny go before Walker. So that's happening sometimes. They're very close. Tommy, start with you. Are you on either one of these 2 guys, and or are you out on both because of the offense?
I'm a firm believer in momentum carrying over from one season to the next. But to your point, and that applies with Singletary, but to your point with Penny now, he's got a rookie breathing down his neck. And they need to showcase some sort of offensive ability. Thus, I think it's going to be a committee approach, at least in the beginning. Kenneth Walker is going to have to outplay Penny. Penny wants to stay in the league. He wants to, get work. He wants a job. And I don't think it's going to be easy to necessarily replace him unless Seattle is just a mess on offense and they have no choice but to play Walker. So I would be a little bit more bullish on Walker than Penny, but I would pass on both if I had to, because there are just other players with upside that I would be more comfortable with, that in the event that I needed to plug them into my lineup, I would expect more production from them versus Walker or Penny.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, just Singletary and Penny are basically going back to back in the NFFC right now, and it's Singletary by a mile for me. Walker he's right around that range too. Yeah, he's actually going in front of Penny right now. And honestly, if I had to take one, I'm gonna revert to Theo's situational. If I've got a 0 RB build, I'm probably taking Penny because I want him for the early weeks. If I'm looking for somebody who can be a hammer down the stretch, then maybe that's Walker. But overall, I just don't love this offense. I don't love the speed that they play. I do think they're going to do something else at quarterback. I don't think they'll be able to get Garoppolo just because they're in the same division. But I could see definitely Baker Mayfield ending up there. And if that happens, I think it makes it a much better offense, but still, it's not going to be a fast offense. The volume of play is just going to keep things down. Though we saw with Penny last year, he certainly can get plenty of opportunities, when he's the lead back. But with Walker kind of nipping at his heels, I just don't love him for the season.
So I pretty much agree with what Dan said. But I will say that Walker's falling. And again, it's going to get to a point where, it's funny. I just wrote this running back article. And when I wrote it, I started writing it. Kenneth Walker was going in the 6th round. You would see him often going at the 6-7 turn, maybe a couple picks before. And now he's dropped. I drafted my first Kenneth Walker share of the summer in the 8th round this week. So he's starting to drop to a point where he's got some appeal because I think his profile's hit over the years, a day 2 running back. We've seen Penny break down. Again, he wouldn't be a guy that you can count on early in the season at all. But I think if he's your, the structural context to it, if he goes a little later, he starts going in the eighth round, or if he pushes towards the 9th round, then I think that you have to be all over it. And I think those days could be coming because the Penny love is there with the beat writers. Definitely an interesting backfield. JD, where are you at with those two? Pick one.
Yeah, no different than you guys. I don't have any. I don't think I have much Walker, if any at all. Just prefer guys going around them. I especially with running backs, I like to get running backs that are in good offenses. They're going to score a lot of points. But similar to Tommy, I love looking at the last few weeks of the previous season for guys. It's not across the board, but guys like Penny, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, looking at what they did in the last segment of the season, to me, that's huge. Because teams want to see what there's coaching changes in the one situation, but they want to see what they have. Penny showed that he's got what they think he has. It's just a matter of him keeping the health. So I do have builds where Penny was going later. I'm pretty sure Dan, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure earlier in the season, Penny was going later and he was a really good 0. Yeah, he was a great 0 RB build guy that you can throw in there and get the earlier season production and then complement him with a guy that's going to produce later in the season, expecting him to get injured, right? But they're not guys that I'm targeting. I don't like guys in these not very exciting offenses.
A player we all love the talent of, Tony Pollard, but he's not cheap. He's running back, 30, 31. And I'll say, if you look at Fantasy Mojo, he has one of the widest ranges of anybody in football guys drafts. He's gone as high as the late 5th, and he falls into the early 8th. So there's a wide range
now, 8.7.
Yeah. So that was the largest range I've seen of anybody getting drafted in that range. Where are we out on Tony Pollard? I'll go first. I really like Tony Pollard. I think this could be the year that Zeke really breaks down. and we might end up with 8 to 10 starts of Tony Pollard. I think it's frustrating to watch him and then watch Zeke, and he looks so good, and it's he doesn't necessarily get the work that we think he all deserves. Where are we at on that, Tommy? You on Tony Pollard this year?
I completely agree. He's actually the reason why I wouldn't take a Kenneth Walker, because Pollard's right there. He's lingering, and you don't want to miss what you just said. If that job goes to Pollard and what he could potentially do in that offense, we saw it last year. He was the most explosive player on the team running the football, and the offense just looks different with him. So I'm going to be very bullish on Pollard, because even if Zeke sustains some sort of respectability, Pollard's still going to produce at worst in your flex position for bye week fill-ins or whatever it may be.
Yeah, Tony Pollard's got that dog in him. And,
my dog, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good, Tommy.
I was laughing at
You're excited for Tony Pollard too. Wheeler's always cracking stuff in the chat. Dan, Tony Pollard, in or out?
I mean, I want to be in, but Mike McCarthy never fails to mess up backfields, no matter where he goes. That's the one thing that gives me pause. But other than that, I like everything about Pollard. He's definitely a better running back than Zeke. I don't think he's got as many touches in him as Zeke does. I think he's more likely to break down, if he gets used too much. But, he's one of those guys that, man, if he's all of a sudden thrust into the starting lineup in, like week 12 or week 13 or something like that, I mean, he could definitely be a league winner. So you've got to have some exposure to him.
Yeah, and if you look at their first 4 games, guys, they're playing Denver, Chargers. Oh man, I'm looking at preseason. Sorry, guys, I was trying to look at their first few games, but
you got me all excited, JD.
No, I know. I was trying to pull it up.
Dan and I were going to go watch that in Vegas
before you gave it to me. But what I was going to say is you got to think with Dallas, if it doesn't click, because they lost Cooper. If it doesn't click right off the bat, Dan, I think even though it's McCarthy, you said that, and I'm like, damn, I didn't even think about McCarthy and how he messes up the RB role. But you got to think that offense is going to want to do something different, or maybe lean a little more on something different. And I think Pollard is that answer. So if we see them struggle offensively early in the season, I think there's even a better chance for Pollard to give us that upside. But I think all 4 of us like Pollard and what he offers in this offense.
And I'll add that we do have the potential wide receiver issues besides CeeDee Lamb right now in Dallas with Gallup with the injuries. Tolbert, for all intents and purposes, is got positive reports, but he's a rookie. They've used Pollard in like the slot a little bit. Maybe this year they're forced to use him more there, and he becomes a little bit more as a weapon. He's certainly capable of doing it. And then also you have the Dalton Schultz contract situation, which nobody's really talking about, but he turned down their contract offer. This could get a little messy with Dalton Schultz. So they don't have as many weapons in Dallas outside of CeeDee.
I heard Gronk's going to sign there. No, I'm joking.
I would love it.
I look at Tommy's face like,
dude, no. Gronk in Dallas, that would be amazing. Let Dalton Schultz go. Chase Edmonds, running back 34. Is he appealing to you guys in that range as a low end RB3? And is he the back that you'd want to have in Miami, Tommy?
As I alluded to earlier, it's a backfield that I just don't want any part of. They're clearly going to have a running back by roulette committee there, and I just don't have enough faith in the offense that they're going to commit to one of these guys. Edmonds, I think, is going to give you at least a few receptions and justify if you do take him, but I don't think he's the best runner on the team. I think Mostert is the best runner if he's healthy, and then you have goal line situations where I think that's going to go to Sonny Michel. So I just don't think there's enough there for any one of those 3 to invest in that capital. Even though it's low risk, there are still other guys in the surrounding rounds or picks immediately after that I much rather have and try and catch that upside than the frustration with these 3 guys.
Yeah, That's a very unenthusiastic click of the button if you have to make that one.
Wah, 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 wah.
Exactly.
I've taken an Edmonds share, and you never feel that excited about it.
Nope.
I do think he's the best bet in Miami, and I think that he's the highest paid running back.
You got to
the
follow
running back that and he's also the running back they went out and got first. So like they got Mostert, but it was kind of like he's familiarity with coaching staff. They got him super cheap. Then they got Sony Michel later in the summer. So I'm maybe a little more bullish on Edmonds than you guys, but like when you compare him to some of these running backs in this range, it's not as exciting.
The issue I have, Theo, just to finish off with him is when he had the opportunity in Arizona, I just didn't see it. You know, like I think the best he gave us a 1 RB6 week against Indy. Other than that, I mean, when he had opportunity, I just didn't see it personally. I don't think he gave what you thought he would give with the opportunity he was given in that offense in Arizona. So I don't know that he can do it out there in Miami. I know that's where the money is, and we learned from Dan, you got to follow the money. So he's going to get the first opportunity. I just don't know that he will capitalize on it.
And there's no rule saying we have to draft a Miami running back either. So if you can't figure it out, just don't draft one. A guy I'm sorry, Dan.
Edmonds is just another one of those guys I'm worried about. If his touch count starts to really get up there, can he handle that? I'm not super convinced about that.
One running back where I know where Dan stands on this one, but are we in and out on Cordero Patterson? It's another year where he looks like the number one running back option in Atlanta, and that might mean that they're using him all over the field. But he's certainly the highest drafted Atlanta running back right now. Is this going to be another year of getting bad returns on drafting the RB1 in Atlanta after last year's Mike Davis grenade? Tommy.
He's an interesting player, but the offense is completely different now. They don't even have Matt Ryan there. We touched on Ritter. I don't know what their offense is going to look like. So I'm okay with passing on a guy like Patterson because, and Theo, you brought Algier to my attention. He's a real elusive back that if he's given the opportunity and he succeeds, it's going to be hard to bench him. But he's going in a range where there's Ramondre Stevenson who's coming up. I'd much rather have Stevenson on a team like New England versus Patterson, even though we know what he can potentially do, but we saw him at his best last year. I don't think he could duplicate that. We haven't seen Stevenson at his best yet. So I'd rather ride that upside and take a risk, if you want to call it a risk, with Stevenson versus a guy like Patterson or draft Algier, later in the draft.
How many shares will Dan Williamson have of Cordero Patterson in redraft leagues this year? I'm going to set the over-under at
0.5. I see we said the same thing. There you go.
Yeah,
we knew Dan. We knew Dan.
Dan, will it be over or under?
It'll probably be under, but I don't want to completely bag on the guy. I think he can be a useful player at his ADP, but he's not going to win leagues for you. I'd rather be looking for upside at that point in the draft, and I just don't think Cordero has it. He's 31 years old. He finally kind of broke out after his mini breakout with the Vikings in like his first or second year
at a totally different position.
A totally different position. Right. He's a good football player. He's no
a good
question
athlete.
about it.
Good athlete, good football.
Yeah, he's a good athlete, good football player. But yeah, I just that's not a bet I want to make.
Yeah, I'm an Algier guy. I like him. I do think that there's and we do get better values potentially on some of these guys in early drafts, but I think that there is a little bit of danger on taking some of these later round rookies. We've all gotten burned on the Jared Dokes type guys where we think we have the situation figured out and then they kind of become dust. Damian Williams is still there. I would love to see Algier get a shot, but I think I can't be completely out on Cordero, but I haven't drafted him once yet. I've drafted a lot. So I might be out on him, but I don't hate the player. I'm just probably out. The situation's not good.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Jeffrey nailed it on the head. He was way more attractive for $1 last year in the waiver.
100%. And Glenn Lowy had about 20 shares of him last year in NFFC for about $20 in Fab total. JD, will you have any Cordero?
I don't. I was trying to think. Was it Abib that we had on here that actually liked Cordero?
Abib does not dislike
Doesn't hate him.
Not to give away any.
Yeah.
Not to give away all.
It's hard. I mean, he gave you RB16 last year, and I think, like Tommy said, that was probably best case scenario. I mean, guys, he gave you RB16. You know what I mean? Like maybe
he was an RB1 for many weeks and
right?
regressed. Like you had like RB5 for a bunch of those weeks.
But another key thing that Tommy hit on was there's no Matt Ryan, right? Matty Ice is gone, so you think that goes to Indy. It's hard to see how this offense goes. Other than Pitts and London, those are pretty much the two only guys I like in this offense.
Backtrack. I skipped over this question, but I think it's a very important one. And Tommy brought him up. He's a player I'm into right now. It's Ramondre Stevenson. New England has Damian Harris. He's going as running back 28, and Ramondre Stevenson, who's really shooting up because James White looks like he's going to have trouble getting back on the field. Ramondre could have that early receiving work, and I like his talent a lot. But Harris scored 15 touchdowns last year. Who do we like more in the context of ADP? Tommy, would you rather have Damian Harris at RB28 or Ramondre Stevenson at RB39?
Oh, Stevenson at 39 for sure. Because where Harris is going is where I would rather have Elijah Mitchell. I would rather be bullish on him and then wait for Stevenson coming back later on, as you said. I think Belichick quietly trusts him. I had this vibe where Belichick didn't want to take him off the field, but Harris was just better. So I think that going into this season, he's going to get a real shot at, not only spelling Harris, but having drives dedicated to him, because I think he's that good of a player. He reminds me of what Marion Barber did for Dallas way back when. I think he could have a similar role eventually on the team, but definitely Stevenson later on in the draft.
I'm on Stevenson for sure. I think that we also have to remember that Damian Harris had some fumbles last year where that like he scores the 15 touchdowns, like all is forgiven, but we've seen him cough the ball up in big situations. If Ramondre Stevenson gets a chance, I think he could run with it. And you can never trust a Belichick backfield. So I'm definitely on Ramondre, 11 RB spots lower. Dan, which one would you be on for those two, if any?
Yeah, so you know who had 18 touchdowns for Belichick in 2016, right? LeGarrette Blount.
The bust.
Yes.
No, not the bust. Oh wow,
LeGarrette Blount. Blount had two.
Blount,
And he had two seasons in a row there.
Yeah,
where he returned value.
Yeah. And then the next season after 18 touchdowns, he had 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I see for Harris. I would much rather take Stevenson at his ADP than Harris at his. I just, somebody who scored 15 touchdowns last year, I think that's bound to regress one way or another. And some of that regression is probably going to fall right into Stevenson's lap. So I'll take Stevenson at that ADP.
JD, which one at ADP?
Yeah, Stevenson, he's that feel-good click, right? We talk about these clicks that don't feel good. He's the opposite. Stevenson, he's got the catching upside. He looked real good, at the end of the season. He's building that rapport with Mac. So you got to think he's going to be more involved in this offense, and especially with like a round or two difference between the two, I would way rather grab Stevenson. Theo, let me throw a real quick, super quick one. Guys, Underdog Fantasy on your phone, on your laptop, on your iPad, wherever, you can play for up to $2 million, guys. $2 million playing best ball. We will match up to $100 when you use the code DISTRICT. Right now, Underdog Fantasy, use the code DISTRICT, get up to $100 free on your initial deposit. We're hooking you up. Let's keep squeezing Tommy till he's sick of us.
Till Tommy falls asleep, we're going to keep going with the running back. This one is rapid fire, fellas. We don't need to go too deep on this one. It's 3 situations where you actually have murky handcuff situations. But I don't want to be out on any of these backfield situations. Arizona, pick a back, Darrell Williams, Keontae Ingram, or Eno Benjamin as the running back you'd want to own behind James Conner.
I just made this decision in my football, guys.
And it's a tough one. Tommy.
I wanted to be Benjamin so bad. I just wanted to be him. I've been waiting for that type of a player for the last couple of years. You get little glimpses here and there, but to be on the safer side, Williams.
Dan?
Same as Tommy. I really want it to be Eno, but yeah, Williams just kind of feels like that boring pick that nobody wants to make that could end up being a really good pick.
JD,
I went
who did you
Eno.
go with on when you were?
I ended up going Eno. Daryl was already gone. He went a couple rounds prior. But getting Eno with what the headlines are saying right now and how he's impressing in camp and the coaching staff is really talking about. I know it's June, July, guys, but that's the information I have right now. And right now he's the RB2 in that offense. And behind a guy like James Conner that we're saying can be top 3 with his health history. I mean, I went Eno, but I want a piece of all 3 of these guys at their prices, as many as I can. Ingram, I would have taken on the way back. He got picked 2 picks prior. I like what he offers. Any part of this offense is another high-powered offense, and these guys are going so cheap that you want to sprinkle them in your rosters whenever you can, especially with those late, 0 RB builds.
I'll go with I'm with you guys. I actually wanted to see Keontae Ingram get a shot. I like his profile, but I'll add this. John Daigle brought up the fact that the contract situation with Williams was kind of cloudy at first. But they gave him close to $1 million guaranteed. He's getting like $850 guaranteed. So it's not a guy that I think is going to get cut. And also I will add that Mark Garcia, high-low, who is a very, very sharp high-stakes player in FFPC streets and the DFS streets. Darrell Williams is his favorite handcuff in fantasy right now. So I'm not going to ignore him on that. I'm Darrell Williams. Cincinnati, Chris Evans or Samaje Perine if you're drafting another Cincinnati running back. Dan.
Evans.
Same. Tommy.
Evans. Big year for him.
Yeah.
Evans, I think it's 4 for 4. I think it's Evans. Perine's definitely a Zach Taylor favorite though, which is kind of annoying, but it should be Evans, and it probably will be.
Right. I guess the way I look at it is Perine, if he's the guy, he's just not going to be that exciting. He's not going to do that well for you. But if Evans somehow is the guy, that's,
Well, I think Evans has more of a chance of being the guy. We've had the eye test. We've seen him, kind of fit in that role. Whereas I don't know that Perine fits in as a true workhorse in that offense.
Perine's a jag, but sometimes those jags that don't fumble and can kind of do the same thing the starter does. True. The coaches like him more than we do. So
especially in a good offense.
I'm rooting for Evans because
it's easier for it to happen in a good offense like Cincy's, right? So
100%. We've all been apprehensive about Antonio Gibson. Would you rather roster Brian Robinson or J.D. McKissic?
Brian Robinson Jr.
Easily Robinson. The upside, man. You already know what you're getting from McKissic, and I don't know. He's not exciting.
I'll go Robinson too. Dan?
Yeah, same. I mean, if they had a different quarterback, I would go McKissic, but Wentz just no. Got to go Robinson.
Another ugly offense.
And full disclosure, a few of us probably would have gone neither. But Robinson's definitely
I did do neither. I almost
neither was definitely the top answer on my board.
Yeah,
there you go.
Robinson.
Okay, so I want to hear our thoughts. Let's say I'm going to list a bunch of players who are all in their second or rookie years that look like the presumed handcuffs. Which 2 are you most excited about when it comes to Rachaad White, Isaiah Spiller, Kenneth Gainwell, Khalil Herbert, Tyrion Davis-Price, and then I'll save the last 2 for their own little tier because they're going a little later. So White, Spiller, Gainwell, Herbert, Davis-Price. Start with Tommy. Maybe 2 of those guys, they're all kind of appealing, but maybe 2 of those guys you might be more into than the others.
Definitely Tyrion Davis-Price. Whenever Shanahan invests in a player like this as early as he did, it warrants your attention. And it's been proven he has a track record of this. And since I'm targeting Elijah Mitchell to start a 0 RB build, I would love to handcuff him and stack him with Tyrion Davis-Price. He was, I believe he was a 4-star recruit coming from Alabama. He's a bulldog. And I really, truly feel that he could step in and play a role immediately. We don't even hear about Trey Sherman anymore. He's going to have a hard time maybe even making the roster. I'm not sure what's happening with him. And if you listen to the post-draft, NFL draft, Shanahan said, John Lynch said that Tyrion Davis-Price is going to be Elijah Mitchell's backup. So he gave us a little bit of a tell. So I'm really excited about his potential.
Dan, is there a player or two of those guys that you are most into?
Yeah, for the same reasons, Price. Probably Rashad White, just because of the offense he's on, over Khalil Herbert, but those two are really close for me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's hard for me to keep Herbert off, but I'm going to go White, and I'm going to go Davis-Price. And I just think that it's a pretty simple one for me. Presuming those guys are the handcuff, any single week that Fournette or Mitchell were out, they'd both easily be in the top 15 running backs without a doubt. Even if there's some sort of a committee in Tampa, White would have that receiving ability with his explosiveness. He'd easily be a top 15 weekly play. JD, you love Khalil Herbert. Does he make it as the most appealing guy of this list for you, or somebody else?
Yeah, well, Herbert's probably the cheapest, right? Out of all of them, he's going maybe like a bit kind of at the tail end of like the rookies that you're mentioning. But yeah. again, my old man in me, I like guys that I've seen do it in the NFL. That means a lot to me. So he gave you RB6, RB11 against Green Bay and Tampa Bay defense last year, 112, 133 total yards in weeks 6 and 7. Not too bad in a Chicago offense, right? So if he gets the opportunity, we already know that he could do it. I love the rookies that you're talking about, Theo, White, and especially Spiller, because he falls a lot. I don't think people really believe in him in LA. But behind Eckler, I mean, who's there, right? And they've been trying to find someone to kind of fill that spot. So I like the opportunities those guys offer. I like the price on all these guys. These are all the guys that I'm drafting as my RBs in these, whether it's hero or zero RB builds that I'm mainly doing in these drafts.
They're certainly appealing. Go down a little further on the list. We've talked about Josh Jacobs as a fade. We've talked about Tommy had Derrick Henry as one of his main fades. Pick between having a Hassan Haskins or a Zamir White. Start with you, Tommy.
Zamir White for sure. Just because I think he's going to have an opportunity, and if he succeeds, it's going to be hard to get him off the field.
I'm
going to go ahead of Dan on this one, just because I think it was today's JJ Zacharyson was talking to someone I really like. I forget who it was, but they were talking about the hit rate on rookie running backs on guys that are going in the first couple rounds, right? And we saw it last year. Who was the guy that everybody loved? Darrington Evans, I think it was in Tennessee. We see it over and over and over. These guys haven't hit, right? Historically, they haven't hit. Whereas Zamir White behind a guy in the dead zone like Jacobs. I mean, that's what you're looking for. Those are the guys that are hitting. So to me, it's easily Zamir White.
Dan?
Yeah, I find it difficult to believe. I'm looking at the NFFC ADP, and I'm seeing Zamir White snuggled in between Sony Michel, Raheem Mostert, Hassan Haskins, Mark Ingram.
Wow.
And I'm going, wow, what a deal.
Easy money.
Yeah, easy money. I'll take White all day there. Especially since he's going to end up going ahead of Josh Jacobs anyway. So,
I like them both. I talked about Hassan Haskins in the article I wrote. I think Haskins, to me, I think that Henry's a fade for me, and I understand the metrics you're referring to, JD, where the first rounders don't fail as much. But I do think Haskins is more of kind of a like for like big back that if you're going to get weeks, he's going to see it. It's very, very close for me. Zamir White's probably the better bet, but I'm big in Hassan Haskins.
And I just want to correct. I'm not saying that those first rounders are kind of guarantees. It's more the fact that the guys behind them, where the rookies that are behind those guys in the top, they don't necessarily end up being that kind of workhorse replacement as people expect them to be. I think that's more what the information.
Oh no, for sure. And at the end of the day, I think that the Vegas offense is going to be better than the Tennessee offense, clearly. Mm-hmm. So you get that as well.
Yep.
Is there any running back that you want to ask Tommy about that we didn't cover? We covered about pretty much everybody in the zone.
I think you pretty well hit them all, Theo. I mean,
so then we have a contractual obligation to ask Tommy the question that every single guest has got since the rookie drafts ended. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Cooper Kupp are all locked in as the top 3 wide receivers in ADP anywhere you're drafting, and certainly in the NFFC. Who would be the best bet outside of those three to finish number one at the position?
Davante Adams. No question.
There you go.
He's number 2 for me overall. I just think that Oakland, the Raiders, the Vegas Raiders need to score points to keep up in that division. So at worst, they're going to be putting up fantasy numbers across the board. They're having Waller come back. So the double team on Adams is almost not going to happen because they also have Renfro running, in the slot running sets. So I really like the output potential of Adams. I hate using the word regression. I think there'll be some as far as his yards and his overall catches, but I think his touchdown upside, he can have a career year in that aspect. Thus, I strongly feel like he could contend for the number 1 overall spot.
I love it. And you're one of the first guests. Not the first guest, but you're one of the only guests that have given Davante Adams as that answer. I love the take. That's awesome. Like last night we had a Mike Evans. We've had a number of guys. Stephon Diggs has been a repeat answer. CeeDee Lamb's been a repeat answer. We had a Cortland Sutton answer recently.
Yeah.
So this is an awesome process with some of our amazing guests, and I love seeing you on Davante Adams.
Yeah. Plus, I understand the love for Justin Jefferson. He's certainly a guy that I would put in the upper tier. But if we're putting Justin Jefferson in a top 3 with Kirk Cousins, then I have no problem putting Davante Adams with David Carr.
Great point.
So I don't see the difference between the two in total output. So especially where Adams is going as far as ADP, it's more value if you wait on Adams.
Especially when you can stack them with Diggs in the 12 spot, like I just did in the drafters. $1 million.
You might have just won $1 million, JD.
And I got the Josh Allen stack in the back. Just saying. I'm just saying. I don't know.
Oh my God.
You got to move out of Canada before that check to avoid those Canadian.
Like a tax 60%, like I did on my bonus, right?
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Fucking bullshit, government.
Well, we covered all those running backs. We kept it under 2 hours. That's a
yeah. Tommy, you've been an awesome sport, man. We appreciate you, brother.
Oh no, thank you guys for having me. Real honor. Thank you.
And Tommy, tell the Moose on the Hill podcast and your articles you're writing. Where can they find that work?
That's so kind of you to even mention and give me the opportunity to talk about that. Thank you. So I have a very simple, user-friendly website at mooseonthehill.com that you could check out. I'm also putting a weekly podcast out that's only about a half an hour long. Want to keep things short, simple, reach out to other like-minded individuals and connect with them and also expand on some of my own knowledge. If the website, if something comes out of it, great. I have something planned a little bit better for next year. But if not, then I'm going to continue with the podcast because, to put it in a vacuum, the 4th of July weekend's coming up. This is the one party of the year where we sit around, talk about fantasy with our family and friends. So to channel that into a podcast once a week is a lot of fun. And hopefully I continue to expand on that project. But that's very kind of you. Thank you for giving me the chance.
And you're putting out really good stuff and keep it up. And everybody should listen to Moose on a Hill. And Tommy's articles have been very good as well. So definitely give him a follow and check out his podcast and his written work. It definitely deserves a lot more views and it's very helpful. And you're having honest football advice from a guy that just cashed for $235,000 last year against some of the better players in the country.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all your kind words, JD, Dan. I really appreciate it.
It's great having you, man. You gave us a cool 120, which is more than generous, and we appreciate it. Hopefully the listeners appreciate it. We appreciate the listeners, the audience. Guys, we're at 400 subscribers on YouTube. Dan, you remember us trying to come onto YouTube from our audio pods. We had, 200 or 300 of those before we came on, and you guys have helped us build. Keep telling your friends about us, maybe not your league mates, but for sure your friends and family so that we can keep building, and smash the like, the subscribe. We appreciate you, Dan. We're so glad to have you back, man. We're glad you got to relax. You got to spend time with the girls. I mean, if my daughter wants to spend 6,000 kilometers with me when she's that age, I have done something good in my life and raising her. So, dude, that's awesome. And anything you want to tell the peeps before we close this out?
No, again, this is a great time of year. As Tommy was saying, everybody's kind of getting back into the the football swing of things. So love seeing all the action going on in the chat room. And, we already said it, but hit that like button. It really, really does help us out. Hit that subscribe button. I mean, you don't even have to watch it, but just hitting the subscribe button helps us out, man. So, even if you don't think you'll watch every episode, if you think you'll watch one every now and then, have that subscribe button hit. It'll be downloaded in there for you. So, in all of our formats, doesn't matter whether we're talking about YouTube or anything else. Those two things really help out a podcast. So please do it. And great to get back into the swing of things. So thanks a lot. It was a great conversation with Tommy.
Theo, the guests keep rolling. So why would they not want to watch, right? If you're not watching, man, you better hope your league mates aren't. Theo, who do we have coming up tomorrow? We have a huge one.
So tomorrow we have Adam Levitan from Establish the Run coming on for a daytime show at 1 o'clock. We're going to talk about some big overarching concepts that are going on, some of the biggest stories that we need to follow heading into July. We're trying to bring on the best guests we can. The most successful players in high stakes fantasy are coming onto the GOAT District. A lot of them are watching us and listening to us as well. And we're bringing on some of the best analysts that we can find, some of the best dynasty analysts, some of the best ball analysts. So we're going to try to help you win your league and win a lot of money with us. We really appreciate all the people listening in.
It's what we do in the district, guys. We appreciate you guys hanging with us. Keep drafting those teams, best ball, redraft, dynasty, whatever you're drafting, man. Stick with us this year. I challenge you, watch an episode and come back and tell me you didn't learn 1 or 2 really good nuggets to make you a better fantasy football. That's our goal. Now, all off season, into the season, 365 years. We appreciate all of you guys. We appreciate Tommy. Make sure you check him out, his pod, all his goodness, and we'll check you all later.
GOAT District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.